you can look on this one, right? But this is where the video is coming from, this way.
Oh, yeah, because this way.
So, oh yeah. How you doing, Charlie?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Pretty good. We have a new setup this year. We have new laptops and a new projector, and so I have to be on Wi-Fi. But I think so far it's working well. And obviously, new class.
Congratulations to you for getting all the new technology. That's wonderful.
Yeah, I like it. I like it. So yeah, I mean, first time introductions. I know these guys have some questions, and they're a little apprehensive about being on camera, so that's why there's only the brave ladies up in front. Yeah, so I mean, whatever we want to kind of chat and start our session with, we can do.
Okay. Well, I'd be happy to do the introduction and kind of the setup, and then we'll go from there, right?
Yep. All right.
Okay, so good morning, everybody. I am Charlie Brown. I am a lobbyist in Washington, and you got to love that name, right? I mean, look at me. I look like Charlie Brown. I got the round head like Charlie Brown. So if you all want to have your laugh right now, go ahead and do it. I mean, seriously, isn't that a great name? Just by way of background, I am an attorney, and I have a practice here in Olympia. I'm what's known as a contract lobbyist, and so I represent a number of different folks down here in Olympia before the legislature, and one of my clients just happens to be the Franklin Pierce School District. So in a very real way, I represent some of your interests here in Olympia, along with the other interests that I represent. So if you guys get in trouble, I'm going to call the superintendent, Frank Hewins, and make him come to this classroom. So you better be here. Wow. So just as by way of background, I think it's important for you to note that the legislative process is basically where, of course, policy is established for the state. And you've got the 98 representatives in the House, and you've got 49 senators in the Senate, and you've got the governor. And those three entities essentially are the policymaking portion of state government. And they can get into a lot of different things. Obviously, McCleary funding and the adequate and ample funding for education has been an issue that has been in the forefront of the legislature's mind in the last several years, because the state Supreme Court, a number of school districts sued the state, which is an interesting thing. You get a school district suing the very entity that's providing you funding, saying you're not giving me enough funding. And it was all based on the Constitution. And so the Supreme Court says, yeah, school districts, you're right. Legislature, you've got to go put more funding. And so, you know, issues like that come before the legislature. And then you've got issues like climate change that come before the legislature, and efforts to try and find ways to reduce carbon emissions that a lot of people think is an important issue. You have transportation funding issues out in your area. Certainly access to I-5 becomes a real issue, because really the easiest way to get to I-5 is to go to 512, and that all gets bogged up, right? I mean, I'm sure some of you guys hate traveling on that roadway at certain times. Why don't we have that cross-base highway? And then, you know, that issue comes up. So you can get into issues of voting rights and the question of when should people be able to register to vote, and how do we get more people involved in the elections process. And as Andy will attest, I was pretty strong, and I still am, an advocate that each and every one of you take your voting right seriously and that you register to vote. And I don't care how you vote, but you need to vote. And too many young people are not exercising their right to vote. And I'll tell you what, you get the government that the people vote in. And if you're not participating in that voting process, you get the government that somebody else decides they're going to impose upon you. So I'm just going to leave it at that, but tell you, register to vote when you can and exercise that vote for the rest of your life. Okay? So, Andy, I don't know how you want to proceed on this. I guess I don't know exactly what you've teed up for the kids so far, but we can decide whether we want to track a bill or we can decide just to talk about basic structures of government and go into some of that in depth, however you want to go forward.
So yesterday we looked at some specific videos from Teach TBW. We looked at the Washington State Legislature one and then the lobbyist one. Okay. And so we've just kind of had a little mini unit on interest groups and lobbying. And so that's kind of the end. And then we have finals next week. So this is kind of the end of first semester.
Okay.
And so and then we'll obviously next semester we'll continue on with the other ones. So I feel like we could talk a little bit about lobbyists and their kind of role, especially yours maybe in Washington. And then if you have any ideas of bills that have come up, I mean, I know it's the shorter session this year, but we could maybe get to that, or maybe that's next time. Either way works for me.
Okay. You've only got a week before you said.
Their final is a week from today, next Friday.
Okay, so let me think about the bills part of it, but I'll start with the lobbyist part of it.
But they're the same class that'll be in here next semester, though. So it's.
Oh, it is. Oh, okay.
Yeah, same class. So yeah.
Then maybe we could start with some kind of a bill and at least carry it through to the end of March.
Yeah, exactly.
Semester.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. The role of a lobbyist really is kind of a fascinating role, I think. Of course, I do it, so you have to take that with a grain of salt. We are folks who give voice, I suppose, to people here in Olympia. And they do the same thing in Washington, D.C., certainly. They do the same thing in county government. They do the same thing in city government. Anybody who comes and is advocating for an issue is technically a lobbyist. If one of you were to come down and advocate for gun restrictions, you may be speaking on your own behalf and you're lobbying a legislator to vote one way or another. Kind of technically, you're a lobbyist. If you were to come down and lobby for voting rights on behalf of a group that you feel like might be disenfranchised, you're representing other people who may not be able to get down to Olympia or get in front of their legislators, and you're representing their voice, and you're a lobbyist. I happen to be a lobbyist for school districts throughout the kind of Pierce County and Puget Sound area. I'm also a lobbyist for some large corporate related interests like Fred Meyer. Where there are issues that legislators have come up with, and they might have a positive or negative impact on my client, I'm going before those legislators and I'm talking to them, and I'm essentially lobbying. Really, lobbyists, while they don't have any really formal role as a part of government, have been a part of government since the founding of our nation. I think they gained a little more prominent role perhaps during the Civil War era as far back as I can tell. But but there's always been people who are talking to their government and to their elected officials about adopting one or another type of law that would, go into effect at some point. What we do is essentially protected by the First Amendment protection of speech. And so if you look at the U.S. Constitution and those 10 amendments, right, the Bill of Rights, that First Amendment is a powerful, powerful amendment, and protection of speech is what is what's guaranteed there. But how that speech gets carried forward is essentially what a lobbyist does. We carry forward the voice for people who otherwise cannot necessarily get to their legislator or elected official to carry that message. So now you see a lot of stuff in the newspaper. You see some stuff that says, the lobbyists are doing this and the lobbyists are doing that. And, there have been some cases where people have acted with some nefarious intent. And, that isn't necessarily representative of what lobbyists are. I think that lobbyists in Olympia, and I think that most legislators believe this of lobbyists as well. Lobbyists are an important information resource for those legislators when they're given consideration to various bills and they want to have as many points of view as they can on legislation. And lobbyists tend to bring that, because just like each of you cannot be an expert on any one particular issue, or on every issue, you can be an expert on a subset or a small number of issues or one particular issue, So somebody might be really interested in rocketry, and I know that you guys have, some of those types of classes there, and really can tell you what the trajectory of a rocket might be and how it's going to come back down and land, and how the SpaceX is able to get a rocket up into the air and then land it back on a landing pad. Another one of you might not give a rip about rockets, but you do care a little bit about orca whales, and how orca whales survive in the wild out there, and that there's different pods of orca whales, and some are resident orcas, and some are transient orcas, and some eat only salmon, and some eat seals and other types. The kid what cares about the rocket probably doesn't care about necessarily, or is not as engaged in orca whales, but you all have information, and that's what lobbyists do. There's over 1,000 registered lobbyists here in the state of Washington. There's probably a good 350 of us who are here every day, and we represent and have knowledge and information specific to particular issues that legislators may want to seek out when they're considering different pieces of legislation. You've got lobbyists who are dealing with social issues. You got lobbyists dealing with education issues, business issues, tax issues, judicial law. It runs the gamut, transportation. And so I guess what I would say in the aggregate is that you shouldn't have a negative view of lobbyists. You read about lobbyists in the newspaper, but we're really no different than anybody else in terms of what we do is simply bring information to legislators, and we try to get legislators to vote one way or another, which are in the interests of our particular clients or our personal interests. So that's what a lobbyist is. Yeah.
So my name's Chet. I have a question. So we were looking at like political cartoons and stuff, and like how they portray like lobbyists is like how you guys just want to get what you want, not what the people want. Like, but you're describing that like what your job is, that you want to help us. But like, I don't know, like why would people portray you like that?
You big one.
I mean, I'm Charlie Brown, right? I'm a cartoon character in my own right, right? So, you know, I think that people may portray a lobbyist in such a light because maybe they don't really fully understand what a lobbyist does, and they have just this view of what a lobbyist does, and they take that view and they make it into a caricature. I mean, the political cartoons that you see in the paper every day are not just funny or a piece of art, which they really are, but they're actually political cartoons are political statements as well, right? They can convey in a picture what a journalist conveys in words, and there may be some of them that feel like lobbyists are doing something that is contrary to the overall public's interest. And they get that opportunity through the newspaper to show that. And I think, and that's a critical part of the whole process. We've got to have freedom of the press. We've got to have freedom of speech. We've got to have freedom of assembly, freedom of religion, and all that stuff just plays into what I think is beautiful about the structure of American government is that people all have voice. And I just happen to have, I use my voice on behalf of people who I believe in. And, maybe some of the, maybe some people don't agree with the tax cuts, let's argue, that Congress just enacted, and they feel like business got these big tax cuts, right? And so they're going to do this political cartoon with the lobbyist with his big top hat on and the money hanging out of his pockets and, just smoking his big cigar. I just got this big tax break. When you actually look at what that tax bill does, sure, there are various provisions in there that affect the corporations and the taxes that they pay, but there's also a lot of provisions in there that affect the individuals, doubling the individual tax deductions. So, people use political cartoons and they use lobbyists as a way of expressing their opinion. And unfortunately, in this day and age, people have less good things to say about each other than they have bad things to say about each other. And I'm of the belief that the more good things we talk about and the more we try and raise each other up and the more that we say good things, the more likely it is we're all going to be happier on a day-to-day basis. And, it never hurts to tell your friend they did a great job on that test the other day. They got an A. Congratulations. I think that every one of you should be saying, I hope you do really well on that test. I want you to succeed, because when you're telling your friends to succeed, they're going to turn around and say, I want you to do well on that test too. And that way, all of you graduate, and hopefully all of you are able to go on and have a successful life. And you raise kids and you tell them, I want you to succeed too, so do well in school. And you can do well on the basketball court, you can do well on the soccer field, you can do well. I just think that we're better off if we speak positively rather than negatively, but that's kind of what we've seen in some of the political cartoons.
Hey, we have the bell's going to ring here in about 30 seconds, and then we have a 5-minute break, and my second class is going to come in.
Okay.
So, hey, guys, can you just give a thank you to Charlie? We'll meet him in a minute. Thank you. So, you can tell they're getting antsy because they know the bell's about to ring.
Oh, I can see that.
But, yeah, so my second group will come in. I'm just going to have them sit right up in here. a little less prep maybe. So, but we'll just go from there. Kind of the same thing. Cool.
Okay. Oh,
Thank
and Andy,
Have a good weekend, guys.
you look straight at me. Not there, but right there. Yeah. If anybody looks there, then you're looking them right in the face from my perspective.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Oh. Can you hear me now?
Go ahead.
I was going to say, if you're looking right at your video monitor, right where you are now, you're
Yeah.
looking right at me. No need to look off to the
Okay, so want me to slide it over so they're looking over?
No, this is perfect.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, when you come back.
All right.
Okay, do it, kid.